You're good.
All right, we're recording now?
Yep.
Okay. Well, to anybody that has listened to my other episodes, you know my aim is to talk with people from different cultures and worldviews. And also, if you've done any traveling, you know that you don't have to leave the country to learn about different cultures and perspectives. So with that said, my guest today comes to us from Atlanta, Georgia. Sterling Mack, thanks for coming on Project Perspectives.
Yo, thanks for having me. I got to say, I'm in Los Angeles at the moment, so we can talk a little travel as well. But yeah,
we'll talk about the culture. I'm well acquainted with the culture there.
But yeah, no, seriously, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, so I started doing just a little bit of Google searching, just trying to jog my brain about, hey, what can we talk about in Atlanta, Georgia and Atlanta specifically. And man, I had never thought about how much Georgia and specifically Atlanta it's been a huge part of the country's history. There's a lot there. There's a lot of culture. A lot of, James Brown came out of there. There's a lot of music coming out of there. The history with Martin Luther King, the whole civil rights movement, even Civil War type stuff. And I was pretty fascinated. So yeah. I don't think we're going to have any shortage of topics today.
No, absolutely not. It was always interesting when I was super little. We lived in this place in like Marietta. I lived like outside the city, kind of where the Braves kind of play now, right?
Okay.
And yeah, I would find these like little Civil War like artifacts. So I lived really close to like Kennesaw Battlefield and Lost Mountain and stuff like that. So when I was like a kid, and it was like different being a kid in the 90s, right? You take your bike out, and it's like you got to be back before the lights come on, right? The street lights. And yeah, we would just find like random stuff all the time that people, had never seen. And I would like, bring it to my dad and be like, oh, it's probably just like a shell casing from like the Civil War. And I'm like, oh, okay.
You're kidding me.
No. So it's always really interesting. Always really interesting to kind of think through, and obviously that history kind of being there, if that, you know what I mean? Like being around you and all that.
Yeah. It's actually been, it's kind of a bucket list thing for me to go and look at some of these different sites and learn some history there, but you grew up right in it. Does it have some extra type of meaning to you then growing up with it?
I mean, it's part of who we are as a country, right? I'm a huge history person. Mm-hmm. So I think anytime that you can kind of think through or understand more about where you come from, more about why something happened, right? So you don't repeat it, is important. Yeah. And so, yeah, it was always something that was there. Obviously, there's some people that truly kind of love that stuff, and you're like, there'd be like reenactments out there. You're like, oh, well, that's something when I grow up, I don't want to do on the weekends, right? But it was always kind of cool to have that around you, right, and then to understand, some of the effects of things like that.
Dude, that's fascinating. That is not something I expected to come up today, but. That's a great story. So tell me, what's your favorite part about Atlanta? What do you love about being there?
Honestly, to me, especially as I've gotten older, is I love the fact that it's like a mecca of Black people. You get this I don't want to say dichotomy. You get this. You get every levels, right, of what we are as people, of our culture, right. And then the wealth of Black people, I think, is really interesting there. So when you're in the city, I think it's something that you just notice immediately is like you go to other cities, right? I don't know if you're in like St. Louis, or I was in Tahoe this past weekend, right? And you're just like, oh, man, there's no Black people here. But when you go to Atlanta, you're always going to see Black people, and Black people of all different types. And again, the wealth there, I think, is really interesting. And so it's something that as I've gotten older, I honestly love it. I love going back and just like feeling the energy of the city, seeing different people interacting with people that they probably never talk to, right? But they're in a bar with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, we got to talk, right? And I always have loved that.
So it's funny that you bring up the wealth thing because I was, again, prepping for this, trying to have some information, and I listened to a podcast, and they mentioned specifically that Atlanta is the city where you see real Black wealth. So can you explain, because that's the first time I've heard that, can you explain what that means?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the city of Atlanta like took off, right? Really starting in like 1980, and then, the .com era and everything like that. And for whatever reason, I'm not talking like athletes and celebrities. That's definitely there, right? Like the dream.
Yeah, plenty of that, yeah.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
Andrew Jones or whatever, right? But there were a ton of people. I guess I can kind of include. We're not like wealthy, right? But like my father as well, right? People that got really great jobs at that time as the city is booming, and then have really made a name for themselves, which is really cool. And so yeah, it's something you don't see in other cities, right? And that's again, I
Yeah.
think that's the really cool thing about it is you could be San Francisco is like an example where I used to live in that city where like you just don't see those type of people there, those type of people. You don't see black people there in the city, right? And especially wealthy black people.
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing about Atlanta. So yeah, and again, it really just kind of happened because the city and the infrastructure took off in the 80s. We've always had like black mayors
Uh-huh.
and things like that of Atlanta. And
Okay.
people were be able to take advantage of it.
Sure. I get how has that had any sort of effect on the culture? I mean, you mentioned you go to St. Louis or other big cities that there's a
Yeah.
black population, but maybe they're not making the kind of money they are in Atlanta. What has that meant to the culture? What kind of effect has it had on
I don't know about me. I mean, I think the culture. I think when you hear hip hop culture, if I'm being honest, like I think a lot of that
you? Hmm.
derives out of Atlanta. I think a lot of it
Yeah.
comes from like the fact that you've got trappers and you got like true artists, and then you've
Uh-huh.
got people that are CEOs and things like that, big type of money out there, and it's all kind of
Hmm.
intermixing, right? And so
Sure.
when you talk culture, yeah, I think you have to always like include Atlanta in that, right? That's always going to be in that conversation, especially when you're talking like what our culture is, like hip hop and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that goes all the way back to, I mean, does it have roots in like James Brown and it goes way back in the day, doesn't it?
A little bit. I mean, there was like, the Great Migration, right? Which is like the 30s and 40s, right? Because the KKK
Explain
is,
that.
yeah, the Great Migration happened in the South because, the KKK becomes very rampant. They start to do the things that they were doing at that time, right? Lynchings become very regular. Sundown towns become
Mm.
very serious for people. It's very hard for people to travel around the South. So a lot of black
Yeah.
people, this is after Reconstruction, they leave the South and they go to like places like Detroit and Chicago and things like that, right? So Motown, that's
Right.
why Motown is in Detroit. But to your
Hmm.
point, everyone's roots were in Atlanta. So I think as the city kind of came back with MLK and things like that in the 60s and people were like, all right, we want to try to come back now, come back home. All those people then were able to get back to where they're from, set up homes, set up, their legacies and things like that. And then you've seen you've kind of seen the effects of that.
Yeah. That's amazing. So you mentioned MLK. He was obviously big in Georgia, I think, Montgomery and Atlanta. How does that show up in the city there? I mean, I'm living in Des Moines, Iowa, and we have MLK Parkway. So obviously, he's big
Yeah.
across the nation. He did amazing things. Everybody knows, the "I Have a Dream" speech. Did amazing things for the company or for the country. How does that show up? Is there a great pride in that? How does he show up there?
Oh, of course. I mean, yeah, so I look at the legacy a little differently, right? So I went to this school. It's called Lovett. It's a private school, and I remember I not had to, but MLK Day came around, and I did some digging, and I found
Hmm.
out that my school actually at the time, back in I think this was like early '70s, didn't allow MLK's kids to go to the school, right? And so I think
Oh.
the legacy is in so many ways, right? It's like
Hmm.
obviously what he stood for, the things that he
Hmm.
has done, right, for the country. And, I
Hmm.
guess you kind of talk about that, some of maybe the baby steps we've taken back, right? But yeah, the legacy is always there about striving to be able to put black people in a place where we're in the same conversations, we're in the same room with everybody else, right? We're looked at the same.
Hmm.
And I always thought that was interesting about the school that I went to. It was like, man, like he fought so hard for me to be able to something that I don't even think of right every day. Like I just go to the
Hmm.
school, right? But
Yeah.
that's something that he had to fight for previously, and I think that's the legacy. Is like, and again, I think we don't think about it, right? Because it's like you go to the
Right.
restaurant or something like that, and you're
Yep.
just sitting there. But that's something that they fought for, and I think that's always something we have
Yeah.
to think.
Yeah. Well, I'm shaking my head not because I know what it's like to be in your situation. I don't. But actually, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast was I realized, being in America, you'd have to go back to my grandfather's. My grandfather was on the beaches of Normandy and went all the way through World War II and was at the Battle of the Bulge and all this. And he grew up through the Great Depression. And it's like, man, he saw real suffering and went through real things and did a lot to build this country. And I'm not here to say that America's perfect, doesn't have faults. Obviously it does, but man, I've had an easy life. And unless I look at these things like you're talking about, uh, how would I'm not going to be able to experience those things. So I need to learn from history and what they had to go through to really appreciate what we have here.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, right? I think we live in this amazing country. And I
Mm,
think anytime you try to like say like, oh, how do we make it better? How do we do those things, right? People kind of like
mm,
quickly attack you.
yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, like I said it at the beginning, I love looking back during history, right? Some of it's dark, some of it's
Yeah.
like painful, but it's really cool to understand some of the things and where we've even come from, right? Or where we previously were, and to understand
Mm,
why some of the things are happening. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I think it's part of what we should be doing, right? As like people, as we try to get better.
yeah. Yeah. Hey, let me ask you, as I was reading through this, I came across this. What is it Ponce de Leon Street?
Yeah,
Am I saying that right? What does
yeah.
that mean to Atlanta? That came up in multiple different videos I watched.
I mean, it's now it's an area that's like super gentrified and things like that, and now there's like tons of new apartments and stuff like that. But it used
Okay.
to be a place where, yeah, I mean, it was in like a kind of a different neighborhood, and there were like different bars there and different places where people
Hmm.
would go. They actually are, excuse me, a couple of the bars that one of them was like iconic to Atlanta called MJQ, which is now like being destroyed and everything. So I would
Mm,
say I don't know about like the long history of it. Obviously, like the Spanish explorer there being in Ponce, but
sure.
like yeah, I mean, I think it's been iconic in like what the city is, right, and how the city's kind of developed and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I grasped was there's a lot of cultural roots there, but it also seemed like it had some sort of connection with the civil rights era and the dividing of the city and kind of divided the North and the South is what I gathered. But I didn't know if it had real meaning or connection to you or not.
It might. I mean, it's so interesting how lines have always been drawn, right? To your point,
Hmm.
I honestly didn't know that if that is the case, actually. So,
I could be
I'm
wrong
more
too. So
no, no. I mean, it's always interesting, right? We're like, where did they draw lines, like all that type of stuff. But no, I mean, to your point, there's a part of Ponce that was always a little. You're like, I gotta like kind of watch where I am right now.
yeah.
And then now it's totally, totally like revamped and totally changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So we talked about Martin Luther King, him being a hero. Obviously, you having a connection with the high school.
Mhm.
I didn't at the beginning. I don't think I introduced how we met. We're actually old friends. We played baseball together. You were an absolute stud. Played at University of Indiana, center fielder, hard nosed player, and even classier guy off the field is what I remember.
I appreciate that.
So being in Atlanta, what does Hank Aaron and him hitting the home runs? The home run that was announced by Vin Scully, by the way,
Yeah.
my late friend. But what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it was always someone that you kind of looked up to. He was always at Braves games. We had season tickets growing up, so like you would kind of randomly like kind of look up and see him and things like that. I didn't know this either, but like when he passed, my dad was like, "Oh, I've got the newspaper clipping from when, he hit 715," and I was like, "Oh my gosh,
Wow.
like what?" And he like sent a picture of it. Yeah, always someone. My dad. I got into baseball because of my dad, and so my dad, that
Yeah.
was one of my dad's heroes, right? Him, like Willie Mays,
Mhm.
and so to be able to be in that city and to be able to play and kind of play at a good high school and win a state championship, all those type of things, like it was always kind of like a backdrop, right, of being able to, obviously connect with my dad and stuff like that, right, but also have this like
Mhm.
kind of legacy that I thought was really cool to kind of follow in something that Hank Aaron did.
Yeah. So it must have meant something to your dad. Did your dad tell a lot of stories about it? I mean, for him to save that newspaper clipping, um, he knew what it meant at the time. Did he talk a lot about it?
A little bit. I mean, he's always talked about the chase, right? And I think just
Hmm.
how crazy that time was, right? Like the death threats and everything, and talked about how just how wild it would have been to have been going to different hotels and having to like think through the security aspect of it, all that type of stuff, right? Um,
Yeah.
and then the actual like feed of it, right? My dad was like, I mean, like Hank Aaron's not a huge dude, right? Like he's not this like
Yeah.
he's not Jose
No.
Canseco, right?
Uh-uh.
And so my dad would always talk about like his wrists, like how strong his wrists were, and how he'd like pop his wrist on the ball, right? And so,
Uh-huh.
and I think to your point, when that happened, I mean, anytime, especially when you're like a minority, anytime someone does something really cool, you're just going crazy for them, right? And so my dad always talked about
Yeah.
like sitting in front of the TV, like small TV in the living room, and watching Hank Aaron hit that, and being like feeling
Mhm.
so proud, right, that a Black American did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah. So are those type of firsts, are those really important? I mean, to me, again, being from a majority population, I never thought, any feat, any sort of accomplishment or success by anyone is cool. But I mean, over the last, 10, 12 years, we saw a first black president. Now we've seen a first black vice president. I don't want to get into politics. I don't care to talk about politics, but just seeing those firsts, are those important to you? Do those impact you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's hard not to be affected by it, to
Hmm.
see. I mean, again, going back to like everything that MLK fought for, even Hank Aaron, right? Those type of people that were on the
Hmm.
front lines of the civil rights movement, to see people in those type of seats, I mean, it's huge. It makes you
Yeah,
feel like, oh my God, like I can actually go achieve that. And
yeah,
that's honestly in anything. I mean, when Will Smith, wins an Oscar, and you're like, oh, he's the first black man, like whatever, right? And you're like, oh my God, like that's crazy to even think about, but like that's
yeah,
so amazing that like that finally kind of happened. Like we finally broke through, right? And I think every minority
yeah,
feels like that, right? It's not just black people, it's like
yeah,
Asian people, it's Hispanic people. Like
yeah,
anytime you see someone do a first, you're like, man, that's super cool. Like I can't wait for someone to do the next one.
yeah, yeah. And that's where I think I was a little bit naive, because I'm like, well, you have enough people come along, eventually you'll have a great, and they'll do it. But again, being from a majority ethnicity, I didn't realize how important that is. So I want to dig a little bit deeper on this, if you don't mind. It seems like this whole time we've been kind of touching on race, which was not my full intention. But let me say this: I realized something. I don't know. Maybe this was a year ago. I subconsciously, or just the way I view the world, I was like, well, I'm going around. I have a lot of interactions with people of different cultures, and I've never hated from any other culture. So maybe racism really doesn't exist. I'm a white person. I don't hate people, so I'm racist. And I realized, well, just because I don't doesn't mean there aren't others. I guess I became clear of my unconscious view there.
Yeah.
So do you think there's racism in America today? Is it still a problem?
Yeah, I mean it's always gonna be a problem, right? Like we're never gonna get around what race is, what race means to us.
Sure, sure,
But
sure.
I think it's more prevalent, right? Like it's things that happen. Think the bad things that happen are more prevalent because of social media.
It's happened. It's Racism has increased because of social media.
No, I wouldn't say that, but I think it's in your face more, right? I think
You're
it's
just more aware of it. Got it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean it's institutional racism or just like blatant racism. Like those are always, I think they're always going to be there. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
but I think
So
now
yeah.
you can't avoid it. Go ahead, sorry.
Sure. No, no, no. I want to see if I can clarify this a little bit. So I've started to hear more terms like systemic racism and things of that nature. So can you help me identify? Does it exist in the laws of our country? Does it exist in our subconscious, biases? Is it systemic type things, or is it just on an individual basis? There are a few people that are racist, and that's just the way that. I don't know if you understand the question.
Yeah, no, I think I do. Yeah, I mean, race. I don't think a law is racist. I can't think of a law that's racist, right? That just like
Okay.
goes after certain types of people. But I think the people that police the laws or the way in which those enforced can be racist, right? Those policies can be enforced racially, right?
Uh huh.
If you look at traffic
Okay.
stops or things like that, right? Those are typically like skewed towards one type of person, right? And then
Okay.
institutional racism is like Wells Fargo, right? Just had to pay out a ton of money, right, to the SEC because they violated essentially like civil rights laws, right? Where they're giving bad loans to just black people, right? Or there was a viral picture
Mm,
of like a black family that that they got an appraisal for their house and it was like $400,000, and they took all the pictures out of their house and then the appraisal came back for $800,000, right? Like stuff like that happens on like a daily basis, and we always
Oh,
know like how wealth is generated, right? Through like home buying and things like
mm,
that, right? Stock market. So
sure.
when those when people that are racist or the institution is racist, right, it's always going to be skewed towards one side or the other. So that's what we talk about when we say institutional racism.
Okay, fair. So what are I can't imagine I'm going to be able to solve this tonight, right? A lot of people have tried to solve this in the past. I don't think I'm going to be the one. But what are some solutions? What's the pathway forward? I mean, is it conversations like this? Is it things like CRT? Is that good? Is that bad? Is it what's a pathway forward that we can all have a more prosperous and happy life? You still with me?
I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, at the end of the day, I hope people just like at some point just like kind of get out of their own way, right? You got to stop worrying about other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the easiest thing to
Mm-hmm.
do. But I
Sure.
think, um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to solve it. Actually, Daniel Kaluuya said something which was kind of funny. He said it a year ago on a Ringer podcast. He was like, I came into this game in '88, meaning like I was born in '88, right? I don't know how to
Yeah.
solve this, right? I think that's the thing. It's like it
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I don't know how to solve people being like bad or shitty to
Mm-hmm.
people because of this the their skin color, right? That's such a crazy
Yeah.
thought process. Um,
Yeah.
and so I don't know, but I mean, it definitely helps to have more people of different colors, different backgrounds in those type of rooms. I say those rooms like decision making rooms, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
higher I think people get, right, it's better if like you bring up someone that's like a minority or something like that. I think it helps you to perceive the world differently. You started to see that on different boards or in venture capital stuff like that, right? Where those rooms are starting to change, and now the people that are getting funding are changing, or just our landscape is changing in those ways. And yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
that just helps in general.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was listening to maybe it was a Joe Rogan podcast, and I like the way he explained. He explained what he thought was the echoes of slavery, and how when slavery ended, everybody was freed, yes, but they were never set up to succeed. And once you're in that cycle, it can be hard to get out of that and get into real wealth. And that's, I guess, ultimately that's what I was asking earlier when you said that Atlanta has generated real wealth. If it's changed the culture or the way people view each other or things like that. So um, it's an interesting conversation. Um, I hope things improve. I think you're right. I think it's maybe more in our face now with social media. So I didn't know if, hey, maybe it's coming back. Is that more of a thing now? But as you pointed out, maybe we see it when before we were in our own bubble and we weren't aware of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was an undertone, right? It's like, it's a tough thing. I'll say back to what you just said there on the like being set up. Like the tough thing is like, how would you be set up if you weren't being taught to like read or something, right? Or you weren't allowed to
Right.
read, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the tough thing
Yeah.
is a lot of times the incumbency is always on like black people or Hispanic people, and it's like, man, like why can't they do X, Y, and Z? Well, it's like for so long, like they couldn't, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my grandfather did fairly well. You talked about like yours coming out of World War II. My grandfather was also in World War II, and like it's one of those where he gets
That's
back
great.
and he works at Sunoco, but he's making 25 cents where his counterparts are making $1, right? So
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So stuff like that, where it's like the wealth that's even generated then isn't the same wealth, right? And so that's the thing
Yeah.
I think is always interesting, where I think we're finally getting to a place where you see more people in the workforce, more people being able to have like six-figure jobs and stuff like that, and being able to make lasting wealth for their families.
Yeah. Did your grandfather tell stories about that? Did he talk about World War II or when he got back?
No, I mean I wish. He died when I was 3, so I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really know him. To be
Sure.
honest, my dad's never really talked about that type of stuff. So no, I did. I
Yeah.
mean, I know that he played baseball actually, which is super cool. I tried to reach out to like Bob Kendrick of like the Negro Leagues Museum and like see if they
Uh-huh.
know anything. Like, I'd love to just see like a picture, like what it looked like, or because they were going around and playing, different
He,
countries and stuff like
he
that, right?
played at that level. He played in the Negro Leagues.
I think that's right, and then I think that's how he got on. I don't know how he got on the team, like in the Army, but he's on the Army baseball team, and so when they went over to Europe, like
Wow.
he would go play. Like that would be the I don't want to say that in a weird way, but that'd be the entertainment, right? So they would go play
Mhm.
against like other countries, and so yeah, which is super crazy. And so I would just love to see like a picture or something, but I've never been able to find it.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of really cool history there. It's in one mind, it's sad to think it's segregated, but also the Negro Leagues has so much to offer. So many great players, and then Jackie Robinson breaking the barrier. He's a hero. Um, so really cool that your grandfather played in that, and I wish I could thank him for his service overseas because I think they did a great service for us.
Yeah, crazy thing about right, like 19 years old, like jumping on a beach in France and being like, oh shit.
Yeah. Storming the beach. Yeah, after living through the Great Depression, and you know, now if my $1,000 iPhone isn't working properly, I complain about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, right? The tech doesn't work. You're like,
Yeah,
what is going on, right? Why did I pay for this?
yeah, completely different lifestyles. Well, man, that's awesome. I really love that. Love to hear that. I'm not surprised to hear that he was a great baseball player after getting to watch you. So I really enjoyed playing with you, man.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, same. It's crazy. I was thinking back through that, like how good, like our team was so good. It's crazy. Like, I remember we lost though. Right, I think we lost I forget right at the end. Like we were about to go to the playoffs or something. Right, like we had 2 games to
Yeah,
win. I think we kind of took it for
yeah.
granted or something, and then like lost.
Well, yeah,
But
we
like
made
an
it.
amazing summer. Go ahead.
Yeah, we made it pretty. Was that the NBC tournament? We made it pretty far in the NBC tournament, didn't we? Was that dude? I ended up playing in Wichita for like 4 summers, so they
Oh,
all
did
kind
you
of run
really?
together. Yeah. But I remember playing with you, in center field, and I think that was the same year that Jason Wysong was on our team, and he's
Yeah.
a good friend of mine. I still talk to him. Still talk to some of those guys, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
No.
guess let me ask you this: you've traveled all over. It sounds like you travel a lot for your job. You're in LA right now. Was there anything once you left Atlanta and then you came back to it? Was there anything that you noticed then that, hey, this is specific to Atlanta? This is culturally specific here.
I mean, yeah, I think like what I said earlier, like so I've lived in Atlanta, I've lived in Charlotte, I lived in Bloomington, Indiana for school.
Mhm.
I kind of, I guess, can count that summer in Wichita. I've been in San Francisco and
Yeah,
now LA. I think the thing I noticed the most about like somewhere in this, like when I lived in Charlotte, right? I was like, man, like this is 4 hours from Atlanta, but it couldn't be farther from Atlanta, right? It couldn't feel farther from Atlanta, you know?
really.
And that's a southern city, very there's southern
Yeah.
roots, all that type of stuff. But it felt different being there than being home, right? And again, a lot of that was just like the black wealth and just like the sentiments of the
Mhm.
whole city, right? The vibe of the city.
Mhm.
But I think when you get to like, yeah, I think that's the cool thing about America, right? Like, you know, I mean, going abroad is amazing, and don't want to stop people from doing that. But it's cool to see other places within the country because you get these different pockets, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the cool things that I love. Like, we try to go up to the Northeast a little bit to like the Cape area or like Martha's Vineyard, and like that's a completely different person than like someone in Seattle, right, or the Pacific
Yeah.
Northwest. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
it's cool to see like the differences in the different pockets and how people interact and talk and stuff like that within the country. But no, nothing. I don't think anything, to be honest, rivals what Atlanta is like the vibe and the culture.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I asked that question specifically because I grew up in California, Southern California, and once I came to the Midwest, it didn't take me very long, but I started to realize that in the Midwest, all social activities revolved around food. It was like, hey, let's go over to this person's house. We're gonna get some food, and let's go here. And finally, I was like, man, isn't everybody tired of eating? Let's go do something. Whereas in California, I didn't realize this because it's just what I grew up in. All the social activities are come around activity. Around activity. Social interaction comes around activity. So you go to the beach, or you go on a hike, you go for a bike ride, you go fishing, you go surfing, snowboarding, go to the mountains, whatever. you're always going to do something. Where here in the Midwest, it's all about food. And I guess it makes sense, you know, here in the Midwest, half the year you don't want to be outside when it's freezing, so
Right.
you get together,
Yeah.
you hang out inside, and you eat some food.
Yeah. Which do you miss? Do you miss being in Southern California?
In the winters, I do. I miss the weather a lot. I mean, I people all the time they'll tell me, well, I really like the season and I like having 4 seasons and experience it all. And I tell them every time, like, go live somewhere where it's always 70 degrees for a full year, and then come tell me that. When you never have to check the weather, you always go out, you have shorts on, you know, good weather to do stuff. And so I miss that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things I really like about Des Moines.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. Yeah, it's been cool. Like, I mean, San Francisco's a different like microclimate, right? But like here,
Yep.
yeah, to your point, like I know what it is every time I'm in a hoodie right now in my house, but like every time I walk outside, it's 70 degrees, right? And then I was
Yep.
in Atlanta 2 weeks ago, and I
Yep.
was miserable, like because it was like 95 degrees, right? I was like, what?
Super humid.
What is going on? Like, how did I
Yep.
play baseball in this? How did I play 3 games a day in this? Right? It's just so
Yeah.
crazy, like how your body adjusts and just like I'm also to your
Fully.
point,
Well,
getting a little soft probably.
oh my gosh, so I was so soft growing up there because I remember, being in high school playing baseball games, and it would get down into the mid 50s for a night game, and we'd have our jackets on, we'd be freezing, and complain about how cold it was, and then
Yeah.
fast forward a few years, I'm in Iowa playing in the spring, and we have to have a propane heater in the dugout just so we can keep. It's just a completely different animal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild, man, and that's just I don't know. What do you think? I don't know if you like know, but like, do you think it's a different athlete there compared to Southern California from a baseball perspective?
Uh, what I noticed. Um, Iowa to California. In California, we played year round, and there was just more people. So, a guy coming out of California high school, he's probably had 500 more at bats, 1,000 more at bats than the guy coming out of Iowa high school. So there's more experience, more game knowledge, and in the denser population, I mean, you're always competing for a job when you're in California. The competition is pushing you that much harder, and it's more competitive. Where you go out to Iowa, where what I found was guys were just as athletic. They were just as strong, just as fast. They didn't have the number of at bats, they didn't have the innings pitched, and they didn't have the same competition. Which I mean can work both ways. I think one benefit to it is actually athletes might not be getting run down as much in the Midwest because they are forced to take breaks because of the weather. Where in California, it's go, 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 and your body might wear out, you might get burned out, things like that. So there's positive and negatives to both, but it's not that the athletes are better in California; it's that they have more experience and there's more people driving them because your spot's about to be taken.
Yeah, that's a great
So
point.
what did you see? I mean, you played everywhere. You played in Indiana, you played down in Atlanta. I mean, we were in Wichita. What did you notice?
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt like Atlanta was the best place for me to play baseball. To your point, I got to play East Cobb. I got pushed. You had to. You're trying to make those type of travel teams, right? That's difficult.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if I could have. I've thought about this a little bit now that I'm like here on the West Coast a little bit. It's like I don't know what would have happened if I like played out here, right? Like what type of school I would have gone to, all that type of stuff. To your point about, I think the competition there is just different.
Mm.
It's different to find your place, right? Now the nice thing is there's
Yeah.
like 1,000 UCs here, so like you probably find a place to play or something, right? But um, yeah, I have found that to be interesting. I would say my Indiana teammates, yeah, I mean they were studs. Like those guys, there were 3 guys off our team that were like in the first round, right? So like we
Yeah.
were good, and those kids were out of the Midwest. But I
Yeah.
do think there's like a drop off, right? Like after your first
Hmm.
9, 15 guys, like there's a huge drop off of like the talent, I think, of who's on the team.
Yeah. 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 The peak talents match up. I mean, I don't care wherever you're at. The good athletes are going to match up. But
Yeah.
it's, how deep is that talent pool? And a lot of that has to do with population and experience.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree.
that's
Would
awesome,
you
man. Yeah.
how would you have like handled the NIL stuff now?
Say that again.
How would you have like handled like NIL? Like would you have like tried to find like a Waffle House or something like that you could like partner
Oh,
with and advertise?
yeah. I wasn't good enough, so I wouldn't have had to worry about it. I would have skated under that radar. Man, I can't remember. So the year we played together, I can't remember if I had a good year or not. Because I had really high peaks and really low lows. I mean,
I
I
felt like
remember
it.
once.
I think you did. From what I
Yeah,
remember, I mean, it's a long while ago.
yeah. I would have to go back and look at the stats. I either, did excellent out there, or I was terrible, and I was just eating up garbage innings. So I was one of those guys. I had a high ceiling, but I had a low floor. I didn't quite put it together. I could throw hard. Fortunately, I was able to play a few years of professional baseball afterwards. I played in the independent league, so I bounced around for a while. So I had some tools, right? I could throw low to mid 90s. I had a big league curveball, but finding the plate wasn't always that easy.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of things to work through. I don't know that I would have been getting any offers, even if it was from a Waffle House or a local breakfast spot.
I find it so
What about
interesting,
you?
right? It's like I just find it so interesting now because you talk about the talent pool, and it's like, I mean, you could be okay, right? But if you can
Mhm.
maximize yourself on Instagram or YouTube or Twitter or something like that, right? Some brand's gonna come
Yeah,
and like maybe give you a little bit of money. So I think you can
yeah,
like
yeah.
you can almost position yourself differently now. I think that's also maybe a bad thing because
Mhm.
kids, instead of you focusing on like being the best player you are, you're like trying to be the best
Yeah.
social media,
Promoter.
whatever, how you want to view that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I do find it. I find it interesting. I just find the whole thing interesting, right? I don't know how I would have handled it. I'm not a huge social media person now, so like, I don't know how I
yeah.
would have like done around it. But like, it's just interesting what you could have done with it if you were just like a middling person. Like, oh, I could still like make some money off of this.
Yeah, man, that's a really good point because I mean they're looking for eyeballs. So if you can create a following, it doesn't don't have to be the best player. You just have to create a following, and you can get a deal like that. But I mean, the good news is for players that wherever you are, if you play hard enough, you got the right skills, the right talents, you show up, scouts are going to find you. So if you want to play in
Yeah,
college ball, you want to play professional, if you get it done on the field, the right people are going to see you.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
hey, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I don't want to eat up any more of your night. So, but before we go, do you? I know you do a podcast yourself. Do you want to tell people about what you're doing there and maybe where they can find you?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, so I do a podcast with my brother. You can find it. It's Sports Tech Atlanta Seed Talk. We do sports and technology. We try to have guests on like CEOs of startups or companies that are in that space that are kind of intersecting sports and tech, like I said. And it's fun. It's fun to do something with my brother. So yeah, appreciate it again. Sports Tech Atlanta. Thanks for giving me the shout out there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've checked out a couple episodes. You guys do a really great job. Interesting conversation, and you have a following, so uh, it's not by accident. So congratulations on that, man. Anything else you want to say before we get off here?
No, man, wait, thanks so much, man. This is cool. It's cool to like catch up with people. It's cool to like have
It is.
conversations and do some cool things. So I love what you're doing. I can't wait to see more of these. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we'll have to do it again when we have some more topics to go over, and let's catch up in the meantime. All right, man.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, take it easy, buddy.